Welcome back to our 30th episode of the Launch Your Farm Show, where I interview Jess Lenouvel with the Listing Labs. In this episode, Jess and I talk about why agents struggle to scale their business after their first six figures and how to overcome that. Jess also shares how to niche down your business to get more business with less effort. We also talk about what type of content you need to create to ensure you reach the broadest audience and convert at a high level. Jess also shares a super easy way to reach people that you can't reach using social media or other online strategies. And we talk about how to create a plan for content that converts and resonates with your farm. Plus, a ton of other ideas that you can use to grow your geographic farm. So be sure to check out this episode, like and subscribe, and enjoy the episode with Jess. Welcome back to another episode of the Launch Your Farm Show. I'm your host, Ryan Smith, and today we've got a great guest. It's Jess Lenouvel you are the founder of the Listing Labs. So Jess, take a second, tell us a bit about yourself and why you're here.
Awesome. Well, I am here because Ryan was so wonderful enough to ask me to come and talk to you guys. A little bit about me. I grew up in the real estate industry. My mom's been a realtor for 35 years. I got my license at 21. So I was a baby. I looked like I was 16. So I built my business a little bit differently than the average person. And so I sold for about 15 years, had a really, really successful team. I'm based in Toronto. So I had a team of 4 people, including like admin and things like that. We were doing somewhere between 250, 300 deals a year. Wow. And so the way that our business was set up too, it was based around having a lot of freedom as well. So from there, I moved on and I started the Listings Lab, which essentially teaches realtors to kind of grow from 6 to 7 figures by creating relationships at scale. Yep. And also being able to have the kind of lifestyle where your business serves you and not the other way around.
And I think that's, for a lot of agents, that's the biggest chain that holds them down, is they get caught up into it and they get successful and then it owns them instead of them owning the business.
And I've done that too. I definitely didn't do it perfectly the first time. My first team was I realized after, 6 months, I was like, oh, I'm kind of their assistant.
Yeah.
Right. And I was working 24 hours a day so that they didn't have to.
So I want to go back then and start. You said you were young. What did that look like for you? You said it was a bit different than most. What did your kind of beginning story look like?
Yeah. So I started out at Keller Williams and, back then the KW model was very much cold calling, door knocking, flyers. And I remember, I went out and door knocked like 1 or 2 times and I thought, this is not for me. Yeah. I am definitely, I've kind of grown out of it a little bit over the years, but I was definitely an introvert and I found it really uncomfortable. And, at the time I was also so young that nobody looked like I had to basically build the relationship before they saw me because I looked so young. Yeah. And so, back then, I'm going to date myself, but Facebook was this brand new thing. And I started prospecting on Facebook. We had, there wasn't any marketplace back then. It was classifieds. Yep. And I just started talking to people and messaging people and building relationships. And I built my business that way initially. And it kind of grew from there. Everything that I've always done has always been 100% online.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's what I mean by I started it a little differently than most people, just because, it was twofold. I didn't want to do it the way that everyone else was doing it, but I also, had to get around the fact that I looked like I was in high school.
I was 25 when I started, and the same thing. I was young and I went to online. The mistake I made was that I hid behind my computer because I didn't want to get out and meet people. And I had a guy call me out on it and say, you need to get off your ass and go meet people.
And actually meet people.
So he said, one thing to talk to people, you gotta take that step. So for you, how did you translate that online into offline business? Because for some agents that's a big struggle for them. Yeah. And then I want to kind of dive into how you do that. But how did it look like for you being young? Yeah. You said hiding behind your age and behind, how did that transition look?
So I used to call it prospecting for my PJs because I could just sit at home and, do my thing. But everything that I did was always driving towards an appointment.
Yep.
So it wasn't just the building relationships, the talking to people, things like that. Once I got to a certain step, the goal was always to book an appointment, figure what they were looking for. I mean, I started with buyers because I was so young, but I moved into the listing side really quickly. And I think a lot of the reason behind that was I really got to a point where I felt very comfortable in my own knowledge and in my own voice.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I looked really young, I kind of over time forgot that I looked really young.
Yep.
And I just got to a point where if somebody, called me out on it and was like, oh my gosh, like, how old are you? Right. I, figured out some workarounds around, what to say and things like that. And if anybody ever had like a really big issue with it, I was really lucky because I had my mom who had been in the industry for 20 years at that point, and I could kind of pull her in and she would just sort of like be another face, but it made them feel more comfortable.
Yeah, makes sense. Totally.
Yeah.
That was my first listing, was a family member, and I was on a team, and that's probably the reason I got it, because I pulled the team in, and I leveraged that and was able to say, I'm not just new. I do have some support behind me, which, like you said, after a while, it's like, okay, I can do this regardless. So for you, obviously you grew it, you were very successful with it, and what you did worked. What was the shift for you to start the listings lab, and why did you start that?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I get called out on this a lot. I actually had a direct message conversation with someone the other day. It was basically like, if you were so successful, why would you do something different? And I think for me, it was very much a service, like alignment thing. And I know that sounds very airy fairy, but like, I was in Hawaii with my husband. We were having a great time. I had this beautiful business that allowed me to like take off whenever I wanted, but I just wasn't feeling super connected to what I was doing anymore. I never really chose real estate. I sort of fell into it because I was young and I came out of school, and I came out of school with a very useless degree that I couldn't do anything with. And my mom basically said, hey, try real estate and see what you think. Yeah. And I really got kind of like wooed by the commission checks and the money that I could make. And then, I got to a point where I had this team and we were making, multiple seven figures, and things seemed on the outside like they were so wonderful, and they were. I just realized, am I going to be doing this for the rest of my life? And for me, it didn't feel like it was necessarily the right thing. Yep. The happiest that I've ever been is when agents used to come and knock on my office door and say, look, how are you doing this? Like, talk to me, or I need help, or this or that. And I realized that I was like, I think that what I should be doing is showing agents how I've done what I've done. Yep. Because there are people, and a lot of people watching this, there are people who absolutely love the business. Yep. And they absolutely love like the actual selling of real estate. And I was never one of those people. I loved the marketing. I loved all of the business building side of it. But for me, it was never really about selling real estate.
Yeah, it's very similar to me. I love the behind the scenes and the marketing and that side of it. The day-to-day transaction of going out and showing properties and writing offers is a necessary evil to complete the transaction, but it's definitely, you can do it. So for you've developed some systems over the years, and it's kind of your core fundamentals. So can we dive into that and share what it is you've created and how you've helped other agents do that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it's growing a business from scratch is very different than scaling a business. And I think, what a lot of people in real estate forget is that, what got you here won't get you there. Yeah. Right. So, the things that I did, and like a lot of the initial first 6 figures of your business is going to be things that are more manual, because you have time. And on top of that, you may not have as much disposable income. So, the way that you get to your first 6 figures, or your first, 150, 200 grand is going to be very different than the way you get from like 200 or 150 to 7 figures. Yep. So I really specialize on like the scaling of an existing business. It's the part for me that I think is actually much harder. I think that, in most markets, if you are personable and you're willing to put yourself out there, you can get to that 6-figure mark. Yep. It's the scaling of the business, the operations, the marketing, and then also the scalability of the marketing itself that I think is really difficult for most people, because most people who get into real estate don't necessarily have a business background. Right. A lot of the time it's people who are like, hey, you know what? I can get a real estate license and I'm really good at like meeting people and talking to people, and people like me. I can do well in this business, which is 100% true. But it's that kind of next step of, okay, I'm now the bottleneck of my business. Yeah. And everybody only wants me, Or, okay, so I've gotten to this point. How do I get to that next level? Where do I find these people that are outside my immediate sphere?
And I find a lot of agents get to that point and then they think it takes twice the work, or they double down, and then that's when they chain themselves to the business, and then
100%.
it's hard to scale it and buy back your time and do it effectively and not go broke, because that's the other thing. A lot of agents can do it and then they go broke doing it and things change. So obviously you've mastered that and you've tailored that. So let's go to that initial step. So if the agent's at 6 figures, what do you suggest as the first step for them to?
One of the first things that we'll do is actually niche that person down.
Okay.
So, there's different ways of niching down. You can niche down in terms of location.
Yep.
You can also niche down in terms of human being, demographic, things like that. We tend to niche down in terms of like location and demographic kind of together.
Yep.
So like the last thing that you want to do, and I see this all the time, like everywhere online, every agent out there is like, if you're looking to buy, sell, invest, from here to Timbuktu, like I'm your person. Well, no, you're not.
Yeah. I always joke with that. Their website has all the areas they service, and the Ajax, Acton, whatever. And it's like that list is longer than their actual content on their website.
Oh, totally.
They say they do all those areas. Like you shouldn't.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? And I think that it's so important that people understand who they're speaking to. So the first thing that we do is we want to figure out like, who's the avatar, who's the target demographic, and then really get to understand them deeply. Pains, problems, fears, desires, right? Marketing at the end of the day is just psychology. Yep. It's really just the science of influence. So from there, when we fully understand those people, then we actually move into, okay, what do these people, we use a 9-point psychological sequence of taking someone from stranger to client. Now, everything that we do, I know a lot of the stuff that gets taught for the most part when you get a real estate license is your kind of one-to-one. Yeah. Right. You're prospecting, you're door knocking, you're individually having conversations. Once you get to a certain point, what we teach is the one-to-many. Yeah. So
I'm a huge fan of that. And I preach that all the time, because that's critical to scale and to get to grow effectively.
Yeah. And everything that we want to do is always going to be unlimitedly scalable. And there's always 2 questions that I ask myself. I still ask myself these questions. I ask our agents these questions, is it scalable? Yeah. And do I enjoy doing it?
Yeah, exactly. That's
important. So those are like my 2 golden rules, right? If the answer is no to either one of them, the answer is no. Yeah. Right. So first of all, once we have that demographic and like the actual avatar really nailed down, that ideal client profile, then we want to move into actually understanding and mapping that psychology. So if I'm going to simplify the psychology, I would break it down into 3 major buckets. So the first one would be authority content. Yep. Right. And this is the same situation. Doesn't matter what platform you're on, doesn't matter if it's a website or a landing page, or, at the end of the day, this psychology holds true no matter what. Tech changes, trends change, platforms change, human psychology doesn't change.
Exactly.
Right. So very first thing would be authority content. So this is going to be things like teaching market updates that are not your typical, like, this is what's happened in the last 30 days in Ajax. It's really more like, okay, so this is what this actually means for you. These are the changes that we've seen in the markets, and someone who actually shows up as an expert and interprets that data for them. Yep. And that, which is again, why it's important to specialize in a demographic. So we've got authority content that's just basically like process solution. So your own methodologies that that you can talk about, that you can help get more buy-in for, a signature system of some sort, authority content. And then your second bucket is going to be personal content. Now, this is where I think most people are missing the mark. People will say, this is my business. This is like my personal stuff has nothing to do with this. But really at the end of the day, we're not, even Tesla, I was going to say we're not Tesla, but even Tesla has a face behind the brand. Yep. And it's really important that people build trust with other human beings. And even on social media, as an example, engagement is twice as high on an image with your face on it than something without you in it. So it's so important that we build that relationship and we build that know, like, and trust through personal content. So that's going to be like things like personal beliefs, personal philosophy, personal story. Yep. Your third bucket we call social proof. So this is case studies, testimonials, and PR. Now, case studies and testimonials are not just listed, just sold.
Exactly.
Okay, so just want to make that super clear. So no just listed, just sold. Case studies are going to actually be like telling the story of a client. And the reason behind it is because stories are 22 times more memorable than facts. So people really want to feel or relate to the person that you're talking about. So actually telling the story of like, what was the situation? What were the pain points? Like people don't move because it's fun, right? Like moving's awful.
There's a small amount of people I think that might do that, that they're crazy enough to just
They're
move for
crazy
fun.
people.
But, yeah,
Totally crazy people.
but
I'm in the
most humans-
process of moving right now. And let me tell you, like, it's not great.
Yeah.
And I think we forget about it, right? Because,
Yep.
you know, when you're in the industry, you're like, that's what you do. You're in the business of moving people.
Yeah.
But the actual process of moving is not, for the most part, enjoyable.
Yeah.
But people do it because their current situation isn't actually, you know, fulfilling what they need. And they're hoping that that change or that new location, the new home, the new property, whatever, is going to solve those pain points. And so that's really all marketing is. It's just, you know, problem solution. And so part of this is also being able to articulate what's in the back of your ideal client's head better than they can.
Yeah.
Because when you can do that, which is why the psychology is so important, when you can do that, it actually means that that person's going to credit you with the solution. They're just going to assume you have the solution because you understand the problem so well.
Yep. And that would answer a lot of objections that people would have,
Totally.
typically have when agents are doing that typical self-promotion type where it's just me. When you're doing that, it's solving their problem, and then that answers a lot of the objections.
Exactly. And it's not about you.
It's not
about you. And I think that like so many agents have forgotten that over the years. And like, you know, real estate's been around for a really long time. And some of the habits and some of the stuff that we've gotten stuck in as an industry is from like the traveling salesman times.
Yeah.
Where like, you know, the way that you sold a vacuum in the 70s is very different than the way that people buy and sell real estate today.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had a guy comment on one of my ads actually yesterday or this morning, who was like, you know, I've been in the industry for 53 years and like, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, great. And that's fantastic for you. But the way that you built and grew your business 53 years ago is very different than the way someone would, you know, start and build a business now.
Yeah.
And, you know, from 53 years ago, you probably don't necessarily have to do all of these things that unfortunately we have to do now, because there's so much more competition. There's so much more tech involved. The way that people look for things are very different. And if you're not, you know, if you want to get to a point where you're doing 100, 200, 300 deals a year, you're not going to be able to do that just through referral in a short period of time.
I always use the, if you had to move test. So it's like, if you had to pack up, start your business over somewhere else where you knew no one, would what you're doing right now work to get going? And it's like, if it wouldn't, then you need to reevaluate and then go, okay, is that to get launched is going to be different. Like you said, the first 100K is different than the scalable side. And there's a lot of agents who use, and I hate to say this, but park benches, billboards, things like that, that if they started fresh in a brand new area with those approaches, their business would, in my opinion, would fall flat. Like
absolutely,
they have an existing name, they have brand recognition, and those things enhance them. But to start fresh, the things that a lot of agents do wouldn't necessarily work.
And it's extremely expensive.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, if you're moving to a brand new market, I'll give you an example. We had someone in our program move to a brand new market at the very beginning of COVID, and she was terrified. And she's like, you know, I don't know anybody here. How do I build my business? And so we started actually building an audience and gearing all of her content towards actually what was going on in that new market. And she had a better year in 2020 than she had in 2019 in her old market.
Wow.
And the reason why that happened was because her content was super relevant. She knew how to build relationships quickly online, and it literally just started to snowball. Mm. And she started building audiences, you know, organically and paid traffic audiences of the exact people that she wanted to work with.
Which is awesome.
Which is exactly like, that's, I mean, and I say this all the time. My husband and I have joked around about this, like our house could burn down and our insurance could lapse and like we could be left with nothing. And we know that we'll be okay because I can create content and I have audiences.
Yep.
That's it.
Exactly. And
that's literally the insurance for my life and my business.
Yeah. which is awesome. So I want to ask you then, because a lot of agents get hung up on I don't want to niche myself too
Yes.
small. I don't want to pigeonhole myself. And obviously, that's the reverse thing that
It's
should be
the
doing.
opposite. Yeah.
Are you finding agents having success with creating micro niches and multiple ones, or are they doubling down on one, or do they say, okay, start 1, 2, and 3? And does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So usually what we do is first of all, we'll look at the population of, their town or city. That like is someone who's in like Toronto can niche down far smaller than someone who's in Halliburton.
Yeah.
Right. So we want to look at the size of the market, what are the demographic trends in the market, things like that, before we actually decide how far down you can niche. The typical niches that you're going to find are going to be easy to create content for, and that are going to be, kind of forever niches. First time buyers, upsizers, downsizers, investors. There's like, those are kind of your typicals. And I find that a lot of the time, if you go too much more niche than that, you will have a harder time, especially with the way that, Facebook and like the targeting's gone. Right. So we need to be able to target in terms of messaging instead of actually in terms of like who you put your ads in front of, because you have to put your ads in front of more people. And if you don't want to be wasting money that way, then your actual messaging in your ads has to attract and repel.
Yeah. And that's, right? I think that's key. And that for a lot of agents, they don't realize that it's not just about attraction, it's repelling. And they try to do all things to all people. And I've seen agents do this all the time, where they do the same marketing message to their entire database, to everybody. And it's like, certain people are going to resonate with certain things. Certain people are going to be resonate with, and some people are going to be turned away from. And you have to understand that. And I've had agents say, like, do I have to create different content? And I'm like, yes, like that's part of your job, or you have to find someone who can, someone like yourself, to help them. It's like, but the better content that matches the people you're going after, the better the results. And
100%.
That's when you can scale, and that's when you can really build it.
100%. I had someone the other day who applied for the program. And just to make this clear, like, we don't create content for anybody. We actually teach people how to create content, because I honestly believe, like, if you outsource your content, it's not going to work.
I agree.
So I had someone, and she said, take a look at my Instagram. And I looked at it and I was like, you have a company posting for you. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, you've hired someone. She's like, how can you tell that? And I'm like, because this is super generic and it's weird. And she was like, oh, you can tell from that. And I'm like, yeah, I could, like, I literally opened her feed. I didn't even have to open anything. And I was like, oh, this isn't your content. And I think that that's something that's really important that people understand, is that, people will, to build know, like, and trust, and to get people to choose you over their cousin who has a license. Everyone knows 5 people who have a real estate license. So if you're going to be that person, especially for strangers, then your content has to be really bang on, and people have to really resonate with you. They have to see you as an authority. They have to resonate with you, and they have to really, really trust you and see you as the best option for them. And posting, it's springtime, it's time to clean your gutters stuff is not going to do that.
And it may have 20 years ago, when no one was doing that, and no one had Facebook, and no one saw all those ads. But now you got to adapt. Yeah, you got to adapt and grow. So one of the things I know that you talk about is becoming the local celebrity.
Yes.
So can you talk to people about that? Because sometimes people get turned off by that. Some people think, I don't want people to know who I am. Is that a fundamental kind of belief of what you guys do, or is that like an additional thing?
Well, I mean, I think it's one of those things that there's different kinds of celebrity. And first of all, I want to start with that. This is not Brad Pitt. Like, this is not going to be like on the pedestal celebrity where people like take your picture when they see you walk down the street. Like, that's not where you're a realtor. That's not going to happen for you. Right. But the kind of celebrity that we're talking about is basically that, like, approachable influencer type celebrity. Someone who, like, actually someone sees you in the grocery store and they feel comfortable enough to come up and be like, Ryan, hey, like, how are you? I saw that blah, blah, blah happen the other day. And the thing that you have to remember with personal content, with, sharing parts of your life, is you don't have to share all of it.
Yeah.
right? It's literally just like you can curate those things and people will feel like they really know you. I'm a bit of an open book. And I think that like, so sometimes it like freaks people out because they're like, well, I like know she's wearing cat socks today and like, like things like that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like you can choose what you share and what you don't share. And especially with personal content, my philosophy is, you can share your mess once you've cleaned it up.
It's true.
Right. So like, I don't want to hear that you're like having a breakdown right now, but like you can talk about the lessons and the things that you learned through a difficult time afterwards. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this, like, I don't want to talk about my kids, right? That's fine.
Yeah.
There's always other things that can be brought in to create trust and to create a brand. But from a celebrity, from like that's kind of local celebrity standpoint, there's a couple of different ways to do it. One of them is through PR. And we use a lot of PR in our program. It's, I'm very lucky. Our head coach in our program and our head of product all across all of our programs, she used to own a PR agency.
Nice.
And so like that lesson, that training that's in our programs, that's not from me, it's from her.
Yep.
And, a lot of that comes down to being able to reach people who you're not reaching through ads, who you're not reaching organically, getting those PR features in newspapers, in podcasts, in blogs, if you get to a point where the Toronto Star sees you as like the local expert for Leslieville, then fantastic, because they're going to keep coming back to you. And the people who follow that publication or who read that publication are going to inherently start to see you as the local expert in that area.
Yeah.
So it's really, really important to build that, like that PR side of things, but also your social media is massively important. Right? Building a local audience on that social media on whichever social media platform they live on, not the one that you like the best.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So like for me, like I prefer Instagram. I have a great audience on Instagram, but my audience on Facebook is actually more engaged.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a choice. I have to create content for both platforms. So because I have to go where my ideal profile is. And it's the same thing with real estate. If you love Instagram, but you're working with downsizers in an area where they only have Facebook, you got to go to Facebook.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but it really is about like kind of really hitting those three buckets, making sure like the authority, the personal, the social proof, making sure you're hitting those three buckets, but PR is going to be like a big chunk of that as well. And the personal content, again, is so, so important because, at the end of the day, what are people really interested in once someone gets to a certain level of notoriety? They want the behind the scenes. There's a reason why the Kardashians have shows and, people want to know that who Elon Musk is dating or, things like that. And, it's not going to be the same thing with a realtor, but they want to know a certain amount. They want to know like your dog's name and they want to know what you do in your free time and like what your hobbies are. And people will resonate with those things. Like I have people all the time who are like, I absolutely love your content, but I hate cats. I hope that's okay. And I'm like, well, we can't be friends, but, but, and it's just, it's something really small. And I do like, I don't have kids, but I absolutely adore my cats. They're like my little feline babies. And, that's something that has become part of my brand. People awesome. Understand that about me and they either joke with me about it or they resonate with it.
And I think going back to the PR stuff, I think it's important for people to know that why that's valuable because from a psychological perspective, because a lot of people think that, oh, I don't want to be promoted that way. I don't care. I just want to connect with people or do my own marketing. And I always use the example, myself being single at the time of the recording. I use the example, if you're trying to be introduced to someone, if I was wanted to be introduced to a female, I go out, if I walk up and say, hi, I'm Ryan, nice to meet you. There might be a chance there, but if I have another female walk up and say, hey, you should meet my friend Ryan and make that introduction, amazing. It's a way better introduction. And when you have PR stuff done, it passes the credibility off to the whatever
the publication
you're using. Yeah. And then it allows you to look good through their lens and through their credibility. And you gain that instant credibility.
100%. There's a reason why like companies like Nike and Adidas, and they get celebrity essentially like endorsements because it's a transfer of trust
exactly
from the people who like love that person.
Exactly.
Right. And the emotional side of it as well, right? Like there's a reason why Super Bowl commercials make us cry. Those are the most expensive commercials that you can buy.
Yeah.
And they're always tugging on heartstrings. They're not saying we're the best. I'm number one.
Exactly.
Look at me.
Yeah. And I use that example too, is that I say, if I go put an ad in the paper or if I put an ad online, I don't go tell my friends and family. I don't show them, hey, look, I ran an ad. But if I get featured on something or if I get exposure through something, then I'm going to go share that with my friends and family. And then I'm more proud of that. I was on the front cover of the Burlington Post, and my mom still, that was 7 years ago, my mom still has it on her fridge. And so people are more likely to share that. And it adds, like you said, another layer of trust. So you have the personal side, you add in that extra credibility, and that obviously makes a big difference.
100%.
So when it comes to content, I want to ask you about that, because this is where I find where a lot of agents struggle. They go, okay, I've got ideas. I know I've got an audience, and they can wrap their head around that. How do people come up with content? Because in my opinion, that's where most agents do suck, is, no offense to my viewers, but they struggle with actually creating good content or stuff that is either original or personal or effective or just not offensive. So I know you teach people to do that. How if you were giving some advice to someone on creating content, what would that be?
So usually what we start with is, for like a person, like personal content, do a brain dump of your whole life.
Yeah.
Like, just like everything from start to finish. Where were you born? How much did you weigh? Like, what was your childhood like? What school did you go to? Who did you get in trouble with? Like, everything from then until now, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? Right there, that full brain dump of like all of your points, that's probably like 800 pieces of content right there, right? Personal content. And then you go and you can say, every single question that you get asked by a client or a potential client is authority content.
Yeah.
The answer to that question is 100% like myth busting content.
Yeah.
Like you'll get to a point where literally you realize every single thing in life is content.
Yeah.
And I think people try to get so, specific, and they don't want to make mistakes, and they want to be super valuable all the time, which I think is fantastic. But every single thing is content. Yeah. Right. The fact that right now, I'll give you this weird example. I just looked at my coffee cup. I have a Starbucks cup next to me, and I realized I broke my intention this week that I was like, I'm going to try not to buy coffee from Starbucks, and I'm going to try to buy more coffee from like small local coffee shops. Right. I just looked down. I could write a piece of content on that.
Yep.
Right. And it's just basically sharing whatever's going on. And, from a social proof standpoint, like, every client, testimonial, case study, talk about the client that you're working with, talk about what happened. If you've done 100 deals in your career, you've got 100 case studies. Yeah. Right. Like, so there's so much ability to have like essentially unlimited content. And every day that you live and have new experiences and have new conversations and get asked new questions, all of that becomes content.
And a perfect example, like you said, about your clients, the reason why the real estate shows are successful is because it's dynamics, there's drama, there's whatever. And people, the regular consumer who are not in real estate, love watching that because there is interesting stuff going on.
Is the perfect place to look at flow of content.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? You just need to be more concise.
Yeah, exactly. And personalize it. You can create it to your own
voice.
Yeah, exactly. And adapt it to what works for you. And that's a perfect example. So if someone wants to scale up, you said, we talked about getting started, getting that stuff. What have you found is that not secret sauce, but they're going from, okay, I'm creating content to now creating content at a much higher scale? Because some agents will say, okay, I've created content. Now what? How are agents getting those higher?
It's usually the psychology that's off. Okay. So go back and interview that client base that you want to specialize in. Most agents aren't niching down enough and they're not getting deep enough into the psychology. So go back, market research is your friend. Go back and interview people who fit that bill. If you haven't worked with a lot of them in terms of like a new niche that you want to break into, friends, family, acquaintances, anybody who you can get to talk to you and to give you like the actual things that are going on in their heads. We want to know psychological, relationship, financial, like every detail that you can get about their current situation and their desired situation, because that's really like the thing that's going to be the most important. The other thing too that's really key is, yes, we want to talk about your process and your systems and your things like that, but and I use this example a lot, don't sell the destination, like don't sell the airplane, sell the destination.
Right. Yep.
Right? It's the same thing like this, where so many agents are talking about the transaction. And the transaction is the main part that the agent is involved in. So it's the most relevant to them, but it's actually not the thing that the client is actually buying.
Yep.
The client is buying the destination. Like nobody's going to say, hey, we're going to throw you in a tin can and hurl you through the sky and feed you terrible food. And you've got to go pee in this little tiny room that with 300 other people are going to use. You'd be like, that sounds awful. Yeah. No, what they're selling you is like, you're going to be in Belize with a pina colada. And like, this is this beautiful image of what your life's going to look like for this 2 weeks that you're there. That's what people buy. The airplane ride is like the necessity to get there. Yeah.
That's good.
Right.
That's
and I think that like a lot of agents don't see that, like, you're just the bridge.
Yeah.
And if you like, in order to really get people to buy in, you have to understand the pains from now and the vision.
That's great. So I want to ask you then, because sometimes I find agents try to scale too quickly or they're not ready. At what point would you say, okay, you can take on another niche, or, okay, hey, we're going to spend more money and scale this up more? Because I'm sure you've seen it where agents do that and then it's like, oh crap, I wasn't ready. My stuff wasn't prepared. Do you have like a metric, or is there a measurement where you're saying, okay, now it's time to?
So whenever we're looking at like systems and like actual scale and how much business you can handle, the first thing that we would do is a task audit. Okay. So figure out like, what are you, like for a week, what are you spending like essentially every minute of your day on?
Yep.
And then we go through it. And this is something I got from Tim Ferriss from the 4-Hour Workweek. We eliminate, automate, outsource.
Yeah.
So elimination first, these are the things that are redundant. These are the things that you don't need to be doing. Automation before outsourcing. This is very different than the way that most people in real estate teach it. Yeah. But automation, a lot of people will end up hiring someone to do a job that a piece of software can do for $100 a month. Yeah. And they're going to pay someone $20 an hour to do it. So, it just doesn't make sense. It's not efficient. Yeah. Eliminate, automate. And then you go to the stuff, okay, you know what? These are the $15 an hour jobs. I value my time. I should be spending more time on the $500 to $1,000 an hour jobs, so that, and then everything else, essentially you're buying back your time. Yeah. You're not paying someone else to do a job. You're buying back your time so you can spend more of your time on the $500 to $1,000 jobs, doing the thing that actually like makes the money. And most agents are not like you and I. They prefer to be in front of clients. They prefer to be doing the actual transactions instead of, setting up everything in the back end. So you and I are the unicorns. But I think that, at the end of the day, it's super important to understand that like you have more time.
Yes.
It's just like everybody has more time. Everybody can be more efficient and create more space, whether that's to work out or to spend more time with your family or to do more business.
Or spend time with your cats.
Yeah. Right. But then, you will get to a certain level where you are legitimately the bottleneck.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. And then from there, you want to look at like what's the format of the team that you want. Now, I know that like MREA and everyone says that there's only one way to grow a team. That's not true. You can grow your team in a lot of different ways. Yeah. I like to go virtual assistants or things like that first before we do like a full admin but I've got people who we're working with who are like, hey, you know what? I want a buyer's agent first. They can handle all their own paperwork. I'm fine with the paperwork that I'm doing. And they want to do it that way. And that's also fine. Yeah. So it really becomes a matter of what kind of a business do you want? What do you want your days to look like? And then really working backwards and building the business that you want, that's going to serve you, and not, the other way around.
I think that's key. What you just said is that you got to work backwards from it, because a lot of agents kind of move forward when they're planning. They don't dissect it. They don't work backwards to what they need and where they want it to be. And then they just kind of run with it, and the business just starts happening, and then they just start adding in pieces, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, that didn't work, that's not working well with that. And that's when I think you run into that issue.
Or they're 5-10 years into the business and they're like, oh, I have literally built myself like a cage.
Yeah, exactly.
Like this is not at all the business that I have, but I don't know how to fix it from here.
Yeah. So if you were to give one last piece of advice to keep people out of a cage or to scale themselves, what would your advice be to our listeners?
I would say you need to be online.
Yeah.
You absolutely have to be online. If you are avoiding it for whatever reason, I get it. Like not all of us love to be on camera, but at the end of the day, it's the idea of you can go one-to-one or you can go one-to-many. And, when I got my license when I was 21, I got this really cute pager and I thought it was so cool. And now we're all running around with computers in our pockets and, there's pretty much no time where you can be in public and look around and everyone's not looking at their phone.
Sad, but
it's sad, but true.
Yeah.
And if you're not taking up some of that space, some of that mind share, some of that top of mind awareness on that phone, you're going to get left behind. And I think it's super important that we understand that the more adaptable that we are as an industry, but also as an individual business, the longer you'll last and the more successful you'll be.
That's awesome. Great advice. And one of the things we do is your best book segment. So what's one book that either has made an impact in your life or you think would make an impact in our viewers' life?
The number one book that I recommend to people is called Willpower Doesn't Work.
Okay.
It's by Benjamin Hardy.
Okay.
And that's it. That book will change your life.
Okay. That's good. I'll have to check it out then. That's great. Yeah. Well, how can our viewers check out what you're up to and connect and find out what you're about?
So I would say Instagram's probably my favorite platform if you want to see my cats. So my handle is at Jess Lenouvel and Lenouvel. And yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to connect people there.
And they can connect with the Listing Labs. How can they find out about that then?
Yeah, so we have a Facebook group that's called the Listings Lab Method for Real Estate Agents. And every single person who's in that group is a realtor. And Ryan's actually part of the group too. So I do a lot of trainings in there. I give a lot of value. I give a lot of, free assets and things like that in there as well. And I'd love to connect with you there. Just answer the 3 questions when we ask and just make it really clear that you are a realtor. Otherwise, we will not let you into that group.
That's good. Okay. So we'll put that in the notes so people can check that out. So thank you for being on here. It's a ton of great information you shared, and I'm excited to share this with my audience because I know if they're at that bottleneck or if they're stuck and they need that next level, I know this will definitely be some great advice for them. So thank you for being on the show, and I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Thanks for checking out today's episode. If you'd like more videos like this, be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out our Facebook page and our other social media channels. Looking forward to bringing you more great content like this, and happy farming.